Hello, welcome back to Post It. When we left off last time, Ruth had just crashed the Dungeons and Dragon party, um, although she was invited from Wolf, so that's a little telling, I think. So we are going to pick up right there. So, and when they asked her to pick her character, she named her character Moose, which tells us that she actually knows what people are calling her. Rose shrugged off our stares. What, you think I'm going to let some stupid nickname get to me? Forget that. My name is Moose Wrathbringer, and I'm a spell-casting ninja with a history of carrying out covert assassinations for top-secret guilds, or something. You can't do that, Dee Dee said. You can't be a spell-casting ninja. For starters, you're a gnome, and the stat requirements, and plus the rules for multi-classing prohibit you to... He stopped talking, his mouth clenched tight, his eyes bulging. Rose had reached out and taken his hand, just grabbed it. And by the look on his face, you'd know that no girl had ever held Dee Dee's hand before. I watched his Adam apple jump like he swallowed a grasshopper. It's all right, Dee Dee, Rose said softly. I can do it because you are the dungeon master, and you can do anything, which means I can be anything, even a spellcasting ninja gnome named Moose, because that's what this is about. We don't always have to play by the rules. She let go, and Dee Dee seemed to relax, although he moved his hand to his lap and kept it there. Yeah, all right, he said, his voice catching. Wolf handed Rose some dice, and we created her character, deciding how strong and wise she would be. Stronger and wiser and smarter than the rest of you, she said with a grin. And by the time Moose Wrathbringer was born, the pizza had arrived. When Wolf paid the money his mother left on the counter, equipped with a slice of greasy pepperoni and magic katana, Rose yelled for us to get our adventure on. Dee Dee talked us through the scenario, which started, predictably, with the three of us sitting around a table at a tavern. Eventually, we ended up in a graveyard and then descended with typical foolish courage into a crypt where we came across a horde of zombies. I tried to sneak around them so that I could find another escape route, but I fell into a pit due to failed perception check. Wolf tried to sing a song that would paralyze them, but it turned out they were immune, and normally this would be about the time that Bench would whip out his double-bladed battle axe of bleeding and go ballistic, but Garthrox the barbarian was out to dinner with his parents celebrating his catch, which left us with Moose. You guys are in trouble, Dee Dee said. Rose licked her fingers and pointed to the cardboard chits that represented the undead horde shuffling towards us. All right, I got this. I cast a spell of absolute zombie annihilation on the whole lot of them, sending back to the foul abyss of zombie-making factory from whence they came from. You don't have a spell of absolute zombie annihilation, Dee Dee informed her. How do I get one? She said. There isn't a such thing. Well, there should be, Rose said. What do I have? You have a spell of scorching touch and you have your sword. A spell of scorching touch? What is that? Like I light my finger on fire and go around and poke people? Yeah, pretty much, Wolf said. That sounds lame. How about I just use the sword? It's called a katana, Dee Dee said. And its name is Charlene. 6 eyebrows shot up around the table. Charlene, I questioned. Yeah, why not? Is that a bad name for a sword? Rose asked. No, it's a fine name. I said, I just thought, you'd want it to be more, intense. Fine. Then her full name is Charlene, the freaking crazy sharp sword that will cut your head off if you make fun of her. Rose gave me a challenging look. Well, that's better, I said. Okay, Dee Dee said, but I'm telling you now, Charlene or no Charlene, you're all better off trying to run away. Rose took a Funyun out of the bag and crunched it. You don't know me very well. Just give me the dice. Dee Dee consulted the tables, compared Moose's stats to those of the zombies. Turned out she needed a roll of 15 or 20-sided on a 20-sided dice to be successful. Otherwise, we were about to have her brains sucked out of our skulls. Rose blew on the dice. Dee Dee asked her not to do that again, and she rolled a 20, scoring a critical hit and decapitating the first zombie in line. Oh, yeah, that's how I roll, she said with a smile, which would have been cheesy if all of us hadn't already said it at some point or another. After that, Moose Wrathbringer went into a rampage, and probably rolling one high number after another, slicing and dicing through the imaginary undead zombies, shouting, "Make way for Charlene," with every toss of the dice. She even stuck her flaming finger into the rotting guts of the last zombie, incinerating from the inside out just for kicks. When it was finished, Moose had a pile of actually dead this time undead at her feet, and the stares of 3 boys who could not believe what they had just witnessed. Garthrox is a wuss, Dee Dee whispered in awe. Rose sat back smugly and popped another Funyun. Never mess with a ninja wizard princess. Wait a minute, when did you become a princess? I asked. I just saved your sorry butt so I could be a princess if I want to be. I didn't argue with that. Instead, I went to go get a drink, and I found my cup empty. Rose reached under the table for the bottle of soda and poured me what was left, and then she tapped her cup to mine. To Charlene, she toasted. To being what you want to be, I said. We all tapped cups, and then we descended farther into the crypt. By the time the adventure was finished, the Queen of the Vampires thoroughly staked, and all the loot split between us. Wolf and I had both gained a level, and Rose had gained 2. Moose was almost where we were. It was still only 9 o'clock, so we eradicated what was left of the pizza, opened a box of fudge brownies, and watched old Doctor Who episodes. It was pretty much a perfect night. No one said anything about Bench. Maybe I was the only one even thinking about him when we all squeezed on the couch, with me and Dee Dee on the ends, and Wolf and Rose in the middle. Tight but workable. Maybe we were all thinking about him, but the game was over, and there was no room on the sofa right now anyway. That night, after Dee Dee's mom dropped me off at home, I tried to call Bench to see how his dinner went, but the cell went straight to voicemail. I wasn't sure if I was going to tell him about Rose or not. I couldn't make up my mind, and I couldn't quite figure out what it meant that I couldn't make up my mind. Would Bench even care? And if he didn't care, what did that mean? I figured he'd ask how the game went, and I would say it was all right. Funny thing, I would say after a pause. Rose came over and joined in. She didn't use your character, don't worry. And then he'd ask something about like who invited her, or was it strange, and I would say it was fine, that it had been nice. I wouldn't say instead of him being there, but I would say it was nice that she was there too. I'd just leave it at that. I definitely would not tell him how much we laughed, how Rose gave Dee Dee such a hard time saying her grandmother would make a better dungeon master, and urging him to just make stuff up instead of taking 5-minute timeouts to read his manuals. I wouldn't tell him how she beat all 3 of us in an arm wrestle contest afterwards, nearly throwing Wolf out of his chair. I wouldn't tell him how she told me her favorite poet was Emily Dickinson, even though I never heard anybody else our age ever admit to reading poetry, let alone having a favorite. And I wouldn't tell him that when we all said our goodbye at the end of the night, she gave out more hugs, and this time it wasn't just to Wolf. All 3 of us got a hug. I wouldn't tell him that I hugged your back, and it wasn't a limp one either. It stretched all the way around, my hug. I would just tell Bench that it was okay, because it was. I dialed his phone number and his mom picked up, and she sounded apologetic. She said, JJ isn't home yet, Eric. He went out to dinner with some of his football friends. He should be home soon. Would you like me to tell him that you called? No, that's all right, Mrs. Jones, I said, and I hung up without even saying goodbye. The quiet. Most people will tell you that the war started in earnest the next Monday, and it was over by the end of the week. I call it a war, but it wasn't really. It was more like a barroom brawl. The kind you see in old westerns where the piano player hides under his bench and the chandelier always gets shot down. It wasn't just one side against another. I'm not even sure there were objectives, or at least anyone's objective, which was different. Some people were probably just trying to be funny. Others had taken Mr. Sword's lessons to heart and thought they could change the world with one sticky note. Others were out for blood. It wasn't about anything new. The same stuff kids had done since Julius Caesar was probably 13. Showing off his designer togas and thumbing his nose at poorly dressed peasants. Fights over who was pretty, who was popular, whose boyfriend was first, who had more money, who had more followers and more favorites. Fights about who said what, to when, and to whom, and why, and whether or not they meant it, and whether or not that made them friends anymore, or not, because I never liked you anyway, and so on and so forth. What made it unique was the battleground. Every skirmish took place on those 3-inch sticky note squares. Sticky notes were the weapons, words were the ammunition. Whatever it was, it became clear by Monday that the tone of the revolution had shifted. Some of the messages were still harmless. They were quotes from philosophers mixed with yo mama jokes. They were earnest entreaties to hug a teacher or kick a squirrel, or an abundance of smiley faces and frowny faces and other emoticons to express feelings. There was the note on Sophia Bauer's locker that said just another pretty ugly face, and where it said ugly had been scrawled in after the fact. There was the note that I heard 4 guys arguing about, listing each of them in order of their attractiveness. There was the note that Maggie Menklin found on the back of her chair, with a sketch of a pair of puckered lips inching towards a butt. Maggie was kind of a suck-up, true, but that didn't make it any less mean. It didn't stop her from raising her hand 7 times in science, though. There were a lot of questions. Why do you follow me around everywhere? Why don't you text me anymore? What's that smell when you walk by? Some of them even got sticky note answers. Some of them were responded to in other ways. There was the usual slurs, slings, arrows, a lot of name calling, even though nothing was on the level that Ruby Sandals had heaped upon Mr. Jackson. It had not quite gotten to that point yet, at least not out in the open. I tried to stay out of it as much as possible. In war, even if you're not the one firing shots, you have to keep your head down. It didn't make a difference, and I'm pretty sure the entire school took a note at some point. My first note was stuck to my locker with nothing but a big L on it. Dee Dee was with me. Maybe the L stands for locker, he said. Oh, I'm pretty sure I know what it stands for, I said. Yeah, it could be worse. Dee Dee showed me a note he found on his locker this morning, and at the top it said, "One dweeb to rule them all." And underneath was a drawing of what I assumed was Dee Dee, though his face was exaggerated. He had 2 big eyes, 2 big ears. They did get his hair right, though, and he was holding the lunchbox. Well, how do you know I didn't put it there, I asked. It was easier if you tried to laugh it off. Oh, mostly because you don't know how to draw, Dee Dee said. I took the note from his hand and crumpled it together with mine and tossed them both in the bottom of my locker. Just another nudge. Besides, being Lord of the Geeks could be something to be proud of, just maybe not in Branton. Not everybody was able to brush it off so easily, though. 2 boys nearly got into a fist fight outside the gym, one shoving a Post-it in another one's face. Then there was the note I saw Rebecca Goldsmith holding, handed to her with some emphatic lower lip biting from her supposed best friend. I didn't see what the note said, but it made Rebecca bawl and sent her running in the direction of the girls' bathroom. A teacher had to go in after her. The bathrooms were the worst. There were hundreds of sticky notes posted all around the school, out in the open for those to see, but the nasty ones, the really mean ones, were either tucked into lockers or left on the bathroom mirror. Like graffiti scribbled on the back of bathroom stalls, the messages you found in the bathroom had a different vocabulary. They were easily worse than parental advisory warnings. Some were crude, some were vicious, all were intended to hurt. Except you had no idea who was hurting you. Almost all the notes were anonymous. No one had the guts to sign their name. You didn't know unless you saw the person actually stick the note, and even then you couldn't be sure because some were passed along from binder to binder, backpack to backpack, until they reached a destination. Most of them didn't stay up for long. The person the note was intended for would laugh or cry or groan or growl or stare at it dumbly before they crumpled it and tossed it into a backpack or garbage to be forgotten. There were a few conscientious objectors who saw where all was heading, and they tried to put a stop to it by taking down any note that they said was mean. For the most part, students got to the worst notes before any of the teachers did, but not always. Unsurprisingly, it was Miss Shears who was the first to pounce, pausing in her explanation of differential equations mid-sentence. "Can I see what you're writing?" she said, circling in a bird of prey fashion around Casey Hillman's desk. Casey slapped her hand over the sticky note, but it was too late. "I was copying down the homework assignment," she said. "I haven't given any homework assignments yet," Miss Shears said. Checkmate. For a moment, I was certain Casey was going to stuff the paper in her mouth and try to choke it down before Miss Shears could pry her lips apart, but instead she melted in her seat while Miss Shears took the note from her. "Did you write this?" Casey nodded. Miss Shears pointed to the door and told Casey to wait for her outside. Then she turned around to address the rest of us, holding the note up backwards so we couldn't see what it says. "I don't want to see another one of these in my class for any reason. Do you understand? If I see them, I will confiscate them and I will send them right to the office with you." And we are going to stop there. Until next time.